It's Maximum News. I am your host as always, Max Derrat, and I'm joined as always by Sybsidian of the Triple S League. We got a lot of gaming news to get into today, ladies and gentlemen, so we're just going to jump right into it. Starting off with a little bit of a dud, but we'll get into the good stuff. I promise there's a lot of good news to talk about today, but we're just going to get this out of the way. Borderlands. There's a movie that's been in development for like ever, Syb. I don't really have much of an attachment to the Borderlands franchise. I tried to. When the original game came out, I promised a whole bunch of my friends that I would play with them, but then I never got it. I think it was around the time that I was starting university or something. And the Borderlands 2 came out. I was like, okay, I promise, guys, I promise. I'm going to join you. I'm going to play this game with you. And then I never did. Yeah, it's just one of those franchises, kind of like Mass Effect and Dragon Age, that they're sort of like my blind spots. But I generally have a good idea what the whole game and franchise is all about. It's like over-the-top humor, lots of guns, lots of shooty. And then because people are trying to turn video games into sort of the next big thing, kind of like what comic book movies have been for like the last 10, 15 years. People are trying to do that with video games. Borderlands is hoping to follow that trend. Well, it's been a little bit of development hell for the movie for the last few years. Syb, did you know that this movie finished shooting in, I think, June of 2021? Do you know it's been that long?
2021?
2021. Oh. Yeah.
I thought it had wrapped in the early 2000s with Charlton Heston still right. Playing reprising a famous role.
When did Charlton Heston die? Well, that's another thing. I don't want my ADHD to take me in a completely different direction. But yeah, no, it feels like it's been forever. I remember that photo that they showed of like the silhouettes of the characters from behind the scenes, and then for like 2 years we didn't hear anything about it. Well, that's because they have been doing extensive reshoots on the movie behind the scenes. Now, you know, reshoots aren't it's not something to be scared about or shocked about, because any movie that has a significant budget is going to go through reshoots. It's something they plan into their schedule. However, because of how long it's taken and the fact that Eli Roth, the guy who directed the movie, wasn't doing the reshoots, it was Tim Miller, the guy who directed Deadpool, was doing the reshoots, that, you know, left a lot of people pessimistic. Plus, I was already kind of pessimistic because Eli Roth is directing this movie. I don't think he's ever done a single thing that I've liked, except for the original Hostel, which I thought was kind of an effective horror movie and really disturbing. But that's it. And then finally, before we talk about the trailer that we're leading up to the trailer that released a few days ago, I think the last time we talked about the Borderlands movie was when we talked about the rumors of Craig Mazin's involvement with it and how he was trying to take his name off the script. In case you guys don't know, Craig Mazin, he's the guy responsible for HBO's Chernobyl and HBO's The Last of Us. So naturally, a guy with that kind of pedigree is probably not going to want to associate himself with this movie. Although there's sort of conflicting reports about whether or not that story was actually true. I honestly wasn't able to get to the bottom of it, but at the very least, it doesn't really do well for the movie's overall image. So that was my knowledge of the movie and the franchise going into the trailer, which released this past week. Now that I've seen it, Syb, is it fair to call this movie discount Guardians of the Galaxy?
Probably.
Yeah,
I mean, this is the thing with Hollywood. Hollywood tends to be way too late and way too behind, and then they try to do this reactionary stuff. And you can really tell the difference between the people who, you know, the first movies in a genre, right? Like when it's like kicked off into like, you know, new high gear and everybody's at their best. And you get that in a lot of the first phase one Marvel movies. And then you have the period where Hollywood just kind of like rinses and repeats.
Yeah.
And they don't really come up with anything new. Say what you want about Ant-Man 1, but I liked Ant-Man 1. I liked how it was still a comedy, but how they had like the narrations do the way that they did and stuff like that. That's smart, but because it didn't do as good, which is probably because the hero wasn't as cool or as big, if you get what I mean.
Until Endgame. Right.
Yeah, until Endgame.
Oh
When
no,
he
no, no!
really
Until
became
Civil War. Civil War. My
Civil
bad.
War. Civil
Yeah.
War. He became big, right? And that's the kind of thing, like, and that's the kind of stuff where Hollywood saw that particular movie as a failure for the wrong reasons, and then they tried to do this. I haven't seen it yet because apparently it's just god awful.
Oh,
Which I'm really wanting to try and get around to watching the second one, but it does tend to follow that concept of like Hollywood then just repeats and they make it sort of like a 3-act like thing, and the formula is always the same, the concept's always the same, the action's always the same, and that's what people get bored with. But in this case, what I think they did is they literally were just like, hey, let's make it like the Marvel movies.
yeah.
I think judging from what we've seen, they literally just said, let's make it like the Marvel movies.
Yeah, they did. They threw a whole bunch of money at it, and from what I can understand, they did it for everything except coming up with a script that had good writing or good humor. Now, granted, we are just talking about a trailer, but when I see a trailer and their attempts at humor are strictly pee jokes and poo jokes for the most part, it does leave me kind of just rolling my eyes and not making me particularly interested. And it's such a shame because they have a talented cast. I mean, it's never a mistake to add Kate Blanchett to any movie. She's amazing. She's a 2-time Academy Award winner. Although, from what I understand, she is not the right age to be playing the character she's playing in the movie. I've heard a lot of people complaining about that. You got Jamie Lee Curtis, who I like. You got, what's the comedian's name that's in everything? The black guy. Oh, well.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'll remember in a second. Yeah, lots of talent. But yeah, none of them, I don't know, seem to really fit in with what they're doing. I will say this, though. From the little bit, I did play a little bit of Borderlands back in the day. Like, it came out on Xbox 360. I think at one point it was free with Xbox Live Gold. And I played a little bit of it. And comparing what I played with what's in the trailer, they did nail the look of Borderlands, at least what you would imagine a Borderlands live action movie would be. I think they did do that quite well. But it doesn't really matter because if you don't have a script there, if you don't have a story there that's going to compel people, if it's just going to make people compare you to Guardians of the Galaxy without having you stand out on your own, then what's the point? So yeah, I don't have much hope for this movie. I don't know. Maybe it'll end up being the greatest movie ever, like, and just completely blow us out of the water. And Eli Roth will finally give us something that's a 7 out of 10 or above for the first time since Hostel. But I don't have much hope. Anything?
Now, I want to point out that I think one of the big problems that they had here is, and I've been looking this up because I forgot to look it up beforehand. But I cannot for the life of me find any mention to Anthony Birch being involved in this project. Which is so weird.
Who's Anthony Birch?
Anthony Birch is the guy who wrote he wrote number 2.
Okay.
And he wrote, here we go, as a writer, he was a writer on he was the head writer, as far as I understand, one of the head writers on Borderlands 2, Borderlands the sequel, Tales from the Borderlands. He also wrote a number of episodes for Rocket Jump the show.
Huh.
He also wrote his own, like, he was a YouTuber back almost before YouTubing was the powerhouse that it was.
Yeah.
And then he wrote, I think, an episode of Anime Crimes Division, which is a hilarious skit. More recently, he's done Legends from Runeterra and New Tales from the Borderlands. So he's a pretty big writer. Apparently, he's wrote for God of War Ragnarok.
Oh wow!
And he wrote is doing something newish with, I think, Adventure Time. I remember reading. It's like all of those projects are good projects.
Yeah,
that were in some cases that were very much ahead of the time. So Anime Crimes Division is like it's a spoof on like Law and Order,
Mhm.
right? Um, just with anime, and it's with some of the guys. I believe it's with some of the guys. I could be wrong here, but I think it's with some of the guys from either Rocket Jump or some of the guys who do a lot of the dubbing for some of the well, it's not anymore, but yeah, some of the dubbing for Funimation.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, they like he was very good. I think out of the writers from the video game days, like, past the 2000s, I think he is one of the better ones. I suppose I should say past the 2010s because yeah,
Mhm.
it's that old these days. But he was the guy who wrote a lot of the hooks that made. So the original Borderlands, the story was hot garbage.
Oh yeah.
Like it was not good. It was like very sporadic. It wasn't really like coherent. There was a lot of random stuff that didn't really make a lot of sense. And then in Borderlands 2, he was the person who really wrote the stuff that turned it into a narrative powerhouse.
Mm.
Again, as I understand from the majority of who I've heard, most people didn't like Borderlands 1 as far as story goes. Everybody loved Borderlands 2 as far as the story went.
Okay.
So again, you have to ask yourself, why did they go and get a bunch of Hollywood people involved when they had better people in their inventory right there?
Well, I kind of disagree a little bit with your premise because there is a difference between writing for a video game and writing for
Hmm.
a movie. But I will agree that if he wasn't involved in, at the very least, a creative consultant position, that's a mistake. Because in order for the Hollywood writers to be able to understand what they're doing, unless they're trying to, I don't know, do something that's called Borderlands, but isn't really Borderlands, you got to have
Hmm.
the main guy involved. It's like doing a Metal Gear Solid movie without consulting Hideo Kojima, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. So.
but it's like it is that quality, that is that level of like the basic script should have been written by somebody who knew, something more about what the games were, because that's how I think we've gotten other better shows. I could be wrong about that, but no, I think I think overall, I think whenever you want to get Hollywood involved with something, they have a bad habit of just repeating stuff
Mhm.
that's worked. They're too formulaic. And although formula and process and like the hero's journey, that kind of stuff, those are classics, and they're actually like almost literally inbuilt into our DNA. It makes sense, but there's a point at which like Hollywood just trivializes that stuff too much, and I think I'm willing to bet that's what's happening here,
Mhm.
or at least that's my 2 cents on it.
Yeah. Well, anyways, guys, what did you think of the Borderlands trailer? If you liked it, I'd especially be curious to hear from you guys what you appreciated about it, because unfortunately, I have sort of just been hearing around like omnipresent pessimism about the project, but I'd love to hear some optimism from some people. Anyways, speaking of optimism, let's talk about an awesome trailer that came out this past week. Elden Ring. We finally know when that goddamn DLC is coming out, June 21st of this year. It has now been bumped up to the number 2 spot of my most anticipating video game related property, coming out in 2024, just behind Hellblade 2. And alongside that announcement of a release date was the trailer for the DLC. In typical From Software style, the trailer was strictly in-game cutscenes and gameplay, which is what all video game trailers should be about and include. Sybe, it looks dope. It looks
It
dope.
does.
Yeah,
Yep.
and the stuff that I'm hearing about it, like the details that came out alongside the trailer, are especially encouraging. The map size is apparently going to be the size of Limgrave, which is sort of like the southern part of the continent of the lands between. For anybody who's ever played Elden Ring, a decent size. I'm curious to see how they'll make use of that landmass. But anyways, 8 new weapon types, one of which is hand-to-hand combat, which is just a joygasm to for longtime Dark Souls fans to hear. I might even actually try to pursue that at some point. A new leveling system that is going to accommodate all levels from people who played the main game. So what that means is if you were like level 180, like I am, and you go into the DLC, you're not going to be overpowered. It's going to give you a new leveling system that's going to be sort of akin to what they do in Sekiro, where you level up by facing bosses instead of grinding for souls, or what Elden Ring refers to as runes, to power up your stats, which is a good idea, I would say. Let's just hope it's not as difficult as Sekiro, even though some people will look forward to that. Let's see, what else? And yeah, some interesting stuff about the lore. Like, obviously, people have been speculating that the DLC is going to center around the character of Mikola. That obviously is the case based on, the dialogue in the trailer, and we see the back of Mikola's head towards the end of it. And but also some interesting lore regarding this new character named Mesmer the Impaler, which people all over, like, the Elden Ring theory speculation YouTubers have been going crazy over. It seems to be maybe related to characters like Marika, because, if he's named the Impaler, then why does Marika have that thing stuck in her? Well, okay, I'm not going to, just in case you haven't played the game. Or the character of Rykard, who's a snake, but anyways, we won't know. Yeah, and the presentation, everything from the lore to the way the world looks to the combat, it looks great. It made me actually reinstall Elden Ring and get back to playing it the last few days, just because, yeah, I'm so excited. And man, I hadn't played Elden Ring in about a year when I booted up a couple of days ago. Oh, that game is just perfection, absolute perfection, and I cannot wait to go back to it with Shadow of the Erd Tree. It's the name of the DLC. Anyways, Side, did you see the trailer? What'd you think?
It looks good, and again, kudos to them to making it with everything in game. There is something to be said about some cinematics, but we've definitely hit the peak of where, I made a complaint on one of these mobile phone games where you see the advertisement for it, and they show you what looks like gameplay. It's not that it's like a cinematic trailer trying to tell you about the world, the environment, the monsters, the creatures, anything like that. No.
It's false.
It's literally fake gameplay. There is no gameplay. They're showing it as gameplay, but there's no gameplay that's like that in the game. Not even close to that in most cases. And that's the kind of thing where we've had enough of that. We seriously have had it. We have to have enough of that, because this is absolutely ridiculous to have this be so present, so just constant, and it's full of lies.
Yes.
Lies.
Yes. Well,
and
From Software knows that they're sort of like the figurative chosen one that used to be CD Projekt Red, but now they are, because they just consistently deliver the types of experiences people want, and they don't want to do anything to mess up that reputation. So they make sure to not mess it up by doing exactly that, by giving us trailers with that are full of gameplay, which is what gamers want.
So I think it's great. I think they're moving in the right direction, and I'm really happy for them.
Yeah, lots of Souls type gameplay to look forward to with that, as well as Black Myth Wukong, which is my third most anticipated game coming out this year, and then maybe kind of Rise of the Ronin in March. We'll see. But yeah, trailer looks great. I'm bloody excited, and just I guess to cap this off, From Software is doing something right when they charge $39 American, which is like what, $50 Canadian, for a DLC, and nobody complains, because they know they're going to get their money's worth. At least we better get our money's worth. Can you imagine if like the DLC is more like Dark Souls 2's DLC, which is like the one bad DLC they've ever done, and not like, I don't know, the old Hunters from Bloodborne. But anyways, yeah, really looking forward to it. I suppose this is sort of like the inverse of the whole Borderlands situation. I'm curious to hear from people that actually weren't impressed by the Elden Ring DLC. I'd be curious if there are anybody like that. Obviously, if you do have that opinion, just express it in a civil, constructive way. All right. Now, we do have some unfortunate news that we got to get into, unfortunately. One was something that happened a few days ago, and another is something that just happened within the last few hours. We're recording this on February 28th. That's Wednesday. I'll start off with the piece of news that happened a few days ago. Sony has just laid off about 8% of their workforce, which amounts to about 900 employees. They announced this via blog post, and the sectors that have been affected include Naughty Dog, which obviously are responsible for Uncharted and The Last of Us, Guerrilla, responsible for Horizon Zero Dawn and Forbidden West, there's Firesprite, Insomniac, and then ancillary employees that are a part of their technology, creative, and support teams all across the world. This follows Microsoft's layoffs from last month, which over half of that, they laid off about 1,900 staff for some reason. Well, maybe it was just because they were trying to trim the fat from like the crap that Activision and Blizzard were doing. Before I go on to the other story that just dropped a few hours ago, Saib, do you think this is sort of, at least in part, a response to investor uncertainty? Because we did talk about that like either last week or the week before, where their stock share fell like almost 10%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, tech right now is under assault, unless you're in the AI field. If you're in the AI field, you're getting hired almost instantly. But in the world of gaming and tech as a whole, I mean, not even AI, because Google lost $70 billion over the last weekend.
Really? What did they do?
They had the Google. Did you not hear about the Google?
The Google problem? Gemini. Oh my God! Really? $70 billion?
Yeah. So they lost $70 billion from just people going, this is not the company to put your money into when you're looking forward to new AI technology, because the AI technology is just not going to work. And I heard a lot of people who were kind of, talking about this, experts in the field and associate experts in the field, is like, if you can't get it to do a basic thing that is historical in nature, then you're not going to be able to, if you ask it to make a car for you, you're going to get, a hot dog stand, and it's going to be like, what? Well, I see these all over the roads. What are you talking about? What's wrong? Don't you understand? This is what you're asking for.
Uh-huh.
That's the kind of thing, and so it's affecting tech all over the place. And it's clear that they were expecting this massive, like, just, and I think you can see it with Facebook too, with the way that they just doubled down on, they quadrupled down on Meta, especially during the well, the why is because I think that there was this moment during COVID when a whole bunch of tech people said, this is the new future. Everybody will be in their homes all the time, and we will be online, and we will be doing everything online, and everything will be online. And then when COVID stopped being a thing, then there was a whole bunch of people who said, right, we don't like that.
Yeah.
And we're going back outside.
Like, I don't fault them for thinking that, because I do actually agree with that general premise, but that's something that's going to happen in 100 years. It's not something that's going to happen in a couple of years.
Yeah, and there's going to be a whole bunch of hurdles to get over in that process. And so I think that's what happened, is they overhired during the COVID thing, thinking that the growth they were seeing was going to continue, and then it didn't.
Yeah. And it sucks, because these are some great studios. Like, I haven't unfortunately played Horizon yet, but their games have been well reviewed, and I've obviously played Death Stranding, where Death Stranding uses Guerrilla's engine, and their engine is just unbelievably gorgeous. Insomniac, obviously, but and it's a shame, because it's a part of like a whole bunch of layoffs that have been happening the first couple of months this year. But that's
the problem. That's the big problem, is that the layoffs have been happening in such large groups that I don't think they're trimming the right people in the right places.
Mm.
Like there's a lot of positions in, I mean, we see it every time somebody posts one of those stupid videos. It's like, this is how my day went. I started by not doing any work for this major multi-million dollar company for
Yeah.
the first 4 hours of my day. And then I only worked for about an hour before I then went out and partied. It's like, that's not getting anything, like that's not actually like doing anything. Like that's not moving product. That's not generating sales. That's not keeping, and we see it with the firings because a lot of those positions are not there anymore. And that's not to say that companies shouldn't, pamper their employees and create a stress-free environment. They should. They need to, clearly.
Yeah.
It's a huge, very important thing to do, obviously. However, that kind of aspect caused a lot of, like, I think when you look at a lot of these companies, when you look at, like, X and Twitter or whatever now, it's like you could say what you want about the content on the platform itself, but the processing, the actual, like, how the actual thing functions as a program is clearly still as good, if not better, than it was, 2, 3, 4 years ago. So they're trimming these roles, and I think that they might be trimming the wrong, like, they might be trimming a lot of the wrong people in the bulks that they've been doing. I said this about Microsoft. Microsoft was absolutely mental, stupidly mental, to get rid of their customer support teams
Yep.
and then to outsource it. That is, like, as a business perspective, it's just a bad idea.
Yeah.
It's just a really bad idea. If I am running any company, period, I would rather have an on-staff janitor than to outsource it to somebody else. Why? Because they have access to everything. It's like,
Yep.
oh yeah, sure. Well, they might leave the door open and somebody might steal your servers. Oh, sure, you could try and sue them, but it's a janitorial company, and B, like, damage is already done. You know, it's just a very bad idea to get rid of people, and I'm seeing it here with some of the lists from the Sony layoffs and from the supermassive layoffs. I'm seeing that it's a lot of support and some tech and some engine people.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
You talk about Supermassive specifically? Because, yeah, that's another thing we had to talk about is how Supermassive got affected.
yeah, well, them and the layoffs that you covered from Sony, a lot of those were, like, there were tech people and people involved in the engine stuff. It's like, if you're making an engine for gaming companies right now, I can't imagine possibly how or why you would want to downsize that at all. Like, engines are the future, like 100% the future.
Yeah.
The Gorilla one, it's like, you've got to get more people on that because you want the ability to start injecting, like, AI assets into that stuff, like being able to, like, train an AI to utilize stuff from within the game that you currently have in the game to make more stuff in the game. You want to start adding more tools and more resources and everything to make it function 1,000 times better.
Yeah. Even though it functions already, we like quite well. It's just that's the nature of technology and how fast it evolves. Absolutely, I completely agree. But yeah, like before I actually detail my story, do you just want to tell exactly what happened at Supermassive and like what they're responsible for and who they laid off?
Yeah, Supermassive got 30%. That is that is huge.
And they have like a
30,
300 employees,
yeah.
so that's like
So
100, almost 100.
yeah, it's almost 100. It was 90 people got laid off.
God. Okay.
And again, it's like, has something major changed at the studio? Is something altering the work that you're doing? Because
They're the ones that did Until Dawn, right? And the
Mhm.
Quarry. Yeah, well, from what I understand, the Quarry didn't sell very well. Even though it's too bad because from what I understand, it was a good game, so that might be
Mhm.
part of it. But it still sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, with horror games, it's like I know I think it is considered a niche form of gaming. Um, but again, it's like that is really rough. Now, again, I don't know exactly what these people were involved with or how to fix that, but that's a deep cut. And
Yeah.
that's what we're seeing with a lot of these companies, is that these are massively deep cuts. And I'm worried that they're cutting way too deep because they need to, like, they need to, there's this idea that, well, if there's 5 companies and your company is doing fine financially, but then the newspaper opens up one morning and 4 of the other companies that do, you all make widgets, right? You all make paper mache widgets. I don't know what they're used for, but they're used for something. All of these other companies are suddenly firing a whole bunch of people. But you call up everybody in your company. It's like, how is it? How are we all doing? Oh, we're all doing fine. Our sales are unaffected by this. Everything's going good. You're still under the pressure to lay people off because everybody else is doing it. And this is what I think is happening in the tech field, is that there might be some of that thinking, because they might be, well, the money might dry up. And that's what I've heard in one of these cases. It's not that the money did dry up, is that they're worried about the money might be drying up because they've had the success in it. And we can see this in some of the successful companies, where they're like, oh yeah, well, we just need to make it look better on paper right now. These are the idiots who these are the idiots who cause problems.
Yeah.
Is the people who think, oh, well, on paper it says we're going to experience a problem. It's like, yeah, but when is your last reports on paper actually been close to the truth?
Right.
And the answer is probably never.
Yeah. Although I generally agree with that premise. I do have questions in regards to supermassive games, because, like, I wonder if they would even do an Until Dawn remaster, or whatever the hell you want to call it, if they weren't experiencing serious financial issues, because that seems a little bit desperate. Because Until Dawn was still relatively recent, and it's still a really damn good game that people love. But
yeah,
I don't know. Still,
I've seen it being quite popular in the general field, so I don't know if or why it goes wrong. But just to add to that is, like, the Raft of Medusa.
No, what's that?
Raft of Medusa is a famous piece of artwork that was done in 1819 or 1818, and it's a picture of a raft of people trying to signal for help out on the ocean. And it was a horrendous story that actually happened. This is not somebody's made up thing. This actually happened. An incompetent French captain installed into a job that he was not capable of performing, basically made a bad call and got a lot of people killed.
Oh, wow.
And it was part of the French Revolution, the things that led up to the French Revolution. But that's the idea, where you have leadership that is looking at something, they're putting people in control or in positions of power to enact certain things, but they're not actually capable of working at that level or working on the things that they understand, and they end up just careening into the side of a cliff.
Yeah, that's a good point. And when it's 30% of your entire workforce, there's a great chance that might be exactly what's happening. And then finally, sorry, this is kind of a sad portion of the story. We do have a couple of other things that we're going to conclude on that are happy, we promise. But this is the last thing. Going back to what you were saying before, Saib, about whether or not they were cutting people in the right areas. Well, I could say for certain that in this circumstance, there are cuts happening in the absolute wrong area. Okay. EA just announced via a company note that they are laying off 670 workers, which is about 5% of their workforce. They want to focus on its brands that it currently owns, and by that they mean their currently existing IP. This includes, in case you guys don't know, EA Sports, Apex Legends, Star Wars Jedi, Iron Man, the upcoming Iron Man game, the upcoming Black Panther game, Battlefield, Need for Speed, Dragon Age, Skate, and The Sims. That seems like the motivation to focus on stuff that you already own instead of trying to branch out for the time being. That in and of itself seems generally smart, which is kind of weird talking about EA. Obviously, the whole layoff thing is tragic, but the thing about this company note that really pissed me off the most. Side, couple weeks ago, we reported on Respawn, the people who are responsible for Apex Legends and the Star Wars Jedi franchise, that they were working on a Star Wars Mandalorian game, a Star Wars first-person shooter Mandalorian game behind the scenes, one that had yet to be officially announced. Well, it's not happening anymore, according to this note, because it got canceled. So, great. I mean, like, you want to focus... Okay, I get you want to focus in on your pre-existing IPs, like in Star Wars Jedi is a pre-existing IP. But you know what else is a pre-existing IP, Syb? Star Wars!
Yeah.
Just Star Wars! And you're worried about whether or not a Star Wars first-person shooter is going to sell well or not? Explain that to me, please. I don't get it.
Especially coming from Respawn, because these are the guys who
did
Apex
Legends
only studios.
Yeah,
this is some of the only studios that are actually turning an actual profit from this.
Right.
And now I get you on the cuts to Iron Man, Black Panther, Battlefield, Need for Speed. A lot of these games are not looking so hot right now.
Well,
at all.
We don't know anything about Iron Man or Black Panther, but Need for Speed, absolutely. Where the hell has that franchise been the last 10 years?
Right. Yeah.
And with Battlefield messing up stuff too. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, no, like Battlefield, I mean, like, how much more propping up does that need? Like, if you're not already like doing a good job with that, then you know what in the world are you doing? And then as far as like Dragon Age, it's like BioWare is barely a functioning studio right now. Like that, like they are down to a very small number of people. Like they needed help a long time ago. Not and they just cut people there, and then they got rid of the union that had formed. It's like, yeah, okay, right. You wanna focus on your biggest franchises. Like, you know what's not in here? Mass Effect.
Yeah.
That's kind of weird. Why, like, like why? I don't know. So I've heard a rumor.
Yeah.
It's a rumor. It's one of many rumors that I will say right now I don't believe, because otherwise I would have included it as an official story and we would have talked a lot more about it. There is some rumors going around that there is in the works for Star Wars just to completely completely redoing Star Wars, essentially like writing off the last 3 movies, trying to essentially relaunch it from the perspective of like immediately following the
Fall of the Empire.
The Fall of the Empire, just like continuing it right from there, because that's where the majority of the interest is. You know, you get these new movies and they're not doing good. The new lore is not doing good. Pretty much everything is not doing good. So that wouldn't surprise me, but I've heard this like 1,000 times before about like Kathleen Kennedy finally being, ousted because she's done a tragically terrible job with this. And and I believe that because Disney is hemorrhaging money right now, and they're trying desperately to figure out how to like turn the ship around, and they're making some really weird statements. And yeah, it's like, yeah, I think that might, if that's true, that they are looking at essentially rebooting Star Wars, or trying to have some kind of like major like change in direction. I can see them wanting to cancel existing projects.
Yeah.
Right? Because that makes sense, right? Like if you're about to upheave and flip or sell off or do any number of weird, bizarre things to an IP to get it, back alive again, maybe you don't want to be throwing a ton of money. Maybe it's not, Disney might not be the people throwing the money towards this. This might literally just be EA saying, well, we just had a meeting and things are changing, so therefore we are going to change things up, and we're not going to really focus on where we're currently headed. We're going to focus on a completely different direction, and blah 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 blah.
Yeah, I get that, but like, why would you want to? I understand wanting to restructure, especially Disney right now. But it's quite clear that if it weren't for Respawn, they wouldn't have a foothold in the gaming market with Star Wars. Why wouldn't you let Respawn work on that and use? I'm not a big fan of Apex Legends, but even I will admit that the shooting mechanics and the moment-to-moment gameplay is generally fantastic, right?
Mhm.
So why not carry that over to a Star Wars game? But it just doesn't make sense unless you're just completely like wanting to scrap everything like they did when Disney originally acquired it, like with Star Wars 1313. But I mean, right now that's kind of looking like that was a bad decision. So why are they doing it again? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. It's really weird. It's really bizarre. And I still stick with my story. I still think that EA intentionally didn't work with the Star Wars IP to the point that they could. I think they intentionally were sabotaging it because they knew that they wouldn't have the IP forever. So therefore, why build it up? You know, it's like a hey, um, buying debt or buying like mortgage debt or something like that in a country that every 10 years or 15 years erases all debt and resets all like borrowing costs and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Generally a good idea. I haven't seen any existing concepts for it, but generally a good concept, right? But if you were a bank, why would you invest, like, you're coming up on like 5-6 years away from all debt being wiped out? Why would you take on any debt whatsoever in that place? And
Yeah.
that's what I think. And that's sort of what I think they did there. And what I still think they are doing here, even with this, is that they're going, we don't have any security in holding this IP for a long period of time. Why do
Sure.
anything in that world when we could do something in the world of Apex Legends, create a different game or a new game around that IP, and
Titanfall
then
3,
have that
excuse me.
because we own that forever. But you bring up a really good point, because why did they let Titanfall just go the way that it went? Why are they sitting on like 80 different IP licenses for games that they've launched or studios that they own or things that they bought out over the last like 25 years, and they're sitting on mountains of IP that they're just not touching at all.
Kill the competition.
Is it because, like, I don't know. Maybe I'm just like, maybe it's what's the razor concept?
Occam's
The
razor.
Occam's razor.
Yeah.
Don't attribute to malice what you can attribute to just sheer stupidity. Maybe the EA executives have always been, and this is probably more accurate, just absolutely incapable at any of the. It's like walking into the in South Park when the boys walk into the financial banking institutions and they're going like, what's going to get money? What's going to survive? And they cut a chicken's head off and the chicken runs around on this map, lighting up the different buttons until it finally falls over. And it's like, all right, we're getting that. We're doing a buyout for this company. Yay. It's like, that's what's going on. That they're like, oh, which thing are we going to do? Let's throw a dart at the board and see what sticks. That's what we're going to double down on. And EA's got this other thing that this other story where it's like they're incorporating non-existent players into the new FIFA game,
Uh-huh.
which it's not actually a FIFA game because
Right.
they lost the rights to FIFA. So it's this new like alternate universe thing, but it has the names of current active players, and then they're bringing in other players and they're just throwing them in there, and it's like, these aren't real people. Why are you lining them up with real people? Why are you replacing some people with other people?
Because
That
FIFA
seems
people
like
who
a
play
problem.
well, people who play FIFA are just going to buy it anyways because it's the only soccer game on the market. So screw
Yeah.
it. That's
Yeah.
why.
So there's some really, like, again, EA, I think that they would be smart enough to like come up with at least some kind of plan, but also this just smacks of the idea that they have no idea what they're doing whatsoever. And they're doesn't surprise me because they have some of the worst analysts giving them game advice there. some of the worst analysts in the industry work for EA
Yeah.
and tell them to do the most stupidest things that that you just like, hey, close down the studio. Why? Well, because like we wanted them to hit 42% profit rating, but they only hit 41% profit rating.
Right.
It's like you realize that anything above a 15% profit rating is like gold, right? Like you can't get that level of a financial investment anywhere in the world.
Mhm.
Why are you expecting it from these people? No idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. So crazy people.
Yeah, it's a logic that I suppose makes sense on the inside, not so much on the outside. But yeah, the way you explained the whole Star Wars thing makes sense, and I hope like if that's what the case is, then I guess it makes the idea of a Star Wars FPS being canceled a little bit more bearable. But I don't know. Let's just hope that sometime in the next few years, Star Wars can finally get back on its feet and actually be the legendary franchise that it once was. All right. That's all the bad news, guys. We're just going to close off on a couple of pieces of, well, I don't know, like good news and let's just say interesting news for the last story. What is this thing about the zombie apocalypse? that's sorry, that's not a good way to lead into it. Why is the zombie apocalypse a good thing, Side?
So it's just an interesting story that I found that flies in the face of what they talk about when they talk about um gamers, right? They talk about gamers and like, oh, you're playing violent video games and you're just going to become a violent individual because you're playing violent video games. And whenever I see any study that kind of balks at that idea, I always want to talk about it. So this is one of them. They discovered that in this one game that these kids were playing, which is focuses around a zombie apocalypse and people being aggressive and whatnot, they found that random acts of kindness were actually driving the game's community to become like more friendly.
Oh.
And this takes me back to Fallout 76, where they had wanted that to be this super like PvP focused game.
Yeah.
Like when they designed it, they really wanted it to be quite a nightmare of like just horrendous, like you log on and you're just stressed from like being shot in the back or something like that. And I saw it on day one when I was playing. It's like you people were like walking up to each other. They're like, a friendly, 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 please, friendly. This kind of stuff. And then what they found out was that actually, no, the majority of the people playing the game were there helping each other out, giving each other like, gifts, leaving welcome packages and like helpful guide messages, and then building giant communities. And that's what this one story came out about, this post-apocalyptic world
Hmm.
where people are just playing and they're interacting in a kind and healthy manner. And frankly, this gives me a lot of hope if we do have an actual zombie apocalypse, because I've watched places like oh crap, what's the one big one, the one big one with Daryl and get in the
Oh,
house,
Walking Dead.
Daryl. Walking Dead, right? Walking Dead is a nightmare. You would never want to be in that world. It is a nightmare. And you don't worry about the zombies so much as you worry about everybody else. All of the other survivors are all evil, out to get you, sadists and just psychopathic, insane people. Turns out, I think we would see a substantial difference of like people actually happy to get together and to work on building new things and actually like going out of their way to like help each other. I think that's what we'd actually see. I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, but this story made me feel kind of good.
Yeah, I'm looking at the story right now. It's from BNN, and they don't specify what the actual game is, but that's really
Mhm.
encouraging to hear. Sometimes humanity isn't all bad, and oddly enough, the evidence that I tend to draw from when I express that belief does come from video games. One of them actually is World of Warcraft. Some of the
Mhm.
most like wonderful people I ever met was back in the day. Just having the time of our lives. Everybody just being really kind and really helpful to each other, playing World of Warcraft, and to know that is also true in a zombie apocalypse scenario. It's something to draw some solace from. Now, let's finish with this side. GDC, or what is it, CDC? I can't remember the name of the actual... hold on, let me see if I could just bring it up really quick. But there's something happening, a convention... Oh, GDC. It's happening in New York and San Francisco in the coming weeks. Yeah. Obviously, that's where a whole bunch of game developers congregate to show off new tech, new games. Well, according to the story from IGN, there is a new piece of technology that's going to be showcased there. It's going to be available for all platforms, consoles and PC. It's called GameSense. And what is GameSense, Saib? It is a piece of technology that utilizes AI to generate smells that match what you see on the screen. So, for example, if you're playing Forza Motorsport and you want to smell what it's like to be on a hot tarmac with rubber burning everywhere and just the smell of really bad hot dogs just being eaten all around you, that's what this technology is purporting to do. They also say that it can be applied to like the smell of rain after a storm. So let's say you're walking around in Skyrim and it just starts to rain. Well, after it's done raining, you can smell the smell that comes, the pleasant smell that comes
Petrichor.
after. Yes, exactly.
Which I call total BS on this. 100% BS.
Yeah.
I have been looking for a petrichor scented anything for years, and I have never ever been able to find one. I have bought a whole bunch of perfumes that claim to be, to have nailed the scent. None of them are even close. None of them are close. Absolutely none of them. Yeah. So unless somebody's come up with something crazy, because I would love that, but I also feel like playing a zombie game.
Yeah.
Ah, yes, the smell of rotting flesh after months of decay. Mm-hmm.
Side. Let's say this technology is at least partially effective. Can you imagine playing The Binding of Isaac with this thing? Can you imagine? What the hell would that thing generate when you're going around like the bowels of hell, smells of sulfur and... Okay, I don't want to say what's in The Binding of Isaac, but just take a couple looks at some pictures and you'll see what I mean. But dude, low key, there are some positive reviews for this. I kind of want to experiment. I want to see what happens when I go into a poison swamp in a Dark Souls game. I want to know what happens when I wade into some radioactive material in Fallout. I want to see if it nearly kills me, so that way I can sue the company and make millions of dollars.
I want to know, does it work for movies as well? Because right. I would love to see what Sex Panther smells like.
Oh my god!
I mean, it's very interesting as a concept.
Oh my god!
By the way, did you know that there's actually a perfume called Sex Panther?
Oh, that probably yeah. Sure.
Yeah. It's officially licensed from Anchorman. Apparently it smells good, not, to the point where everybody's throwing up and jumping off the building because it smells so bad. Mm. But yeah.
70% of the time, the smell works every time. I've never seen Anchorman. That's the only line that I know from it. I know it's legendary. I need to watch it at some point, but I mean, we'll see. Like I said, if it gets positive reviews, I might check it out. I mean, I know it's kind of a novelty thing, and hopefully it's on the cheaper end. Like if it costs as much as like VR does, I'm not going to get it. But who knows? We're entering quite a technologically advanced stage, guys, and even if it's not ready now, and this is kind of a scam, I'm not going to die of shock if it's something like it comes out in the next 10 years. Anyways, that does it for this episode of Maximum News, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us. Make sure you hit the like button because that helps out this, not only this video, but the entire Triple S League channel a whole lot when you do that. Leave a comment if you have any thoughts on any of the stuff that Saib and I talked about today. Side, you have anything you want to say before we're done?
No, working on new stuff. We are going to be covering Fallout London. So get ready for that.
When is that coming out?
April.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So I'm really excited. This is our chance to see if there can be mainstream success with an older game engine building on lore and existing story framework from RPGs.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that it does fantastic. Like, I really hope. I am crossing my fingers. I'm really crossing my fingers because I want this to do so well that it changes the way that gaming is done. I would love that. Because again, the more people that have access to do stuff without restraint, the better. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
I want that to do well because I want Bethesda to take notice, and then I want them to fund everybody on the Behind Skyrim project, so that way they can populate the entirety of Tamriel. That would be in their best interest, I think. But yeah, I'm curious to see how it turns out as well, because as somebody who's recently been getting into Fallout, because I've been playing Fallout New Vegas, I want to be a part of the community, as well as with the TV show coming out. And then you guys could just find me on all the regular forms of social media, just at Max Derrat. I'll have a new video coming out, today at the time of this posting on my main channel. It's going to be on Silent Hill Downpour. You want to check that out. We'll do this again next week, guys. Until then, I want to remind you, as always, and as per usual, stay yellow.
Goodbye.